Hello, everybody. It's really wonderful to see so many people here eager to learn about build profiles in Unity 6. I hope by the end of this session, you will have everything you need to know. My name is Tom. I'm a technical product manager with Unity in the platforms group. I'm responsible for cross-platform things. And before working in product, I was also working at Unity as an engineer in our success and support teams. And before that, an indie developer, both solo and with teams. So I've been working in and around Unity for a long time, and I've made many builds. Here's a brief overview of what we're going to look at today. We're going to have a look at build profiles, what they are, what problems they try and solve. We're going to look at some code for the new API. We'll look at some example use cases and talk a little bit about where all this is leading in the future. We can also, time willing, jump into a live demo of the workflow itself, which I think is helpful to see where these things live inside the editor, and hopefully some Q&A at the end too. So two things that I'd like to say right at the beginning. Most of what we're going to look at right now in the deck and in the demo is available in the Unity 6 preview right now. So you can go and experiment with these features if you see value in them. And second, while we are adding a new workflow that we think is a big step up for a lot of teams, the existing workflow that you know and love from 2022 versions still exists, and the associated APIs are all still here, and they're here to stay. So existing projects upgrading to Unity 6 will function as you expect. So there's a lot of things to cover here, and we're going to be looking at quite a lot of editor UI, which I'm sure is very exciting for you all. So we should probably just get started. I present to you the old build window. Hands up if you recognize this, seen it before. Yeah. For those that aren't familiar, this is the place in the editor we go to set which is our active platform. That is to say, the one we're currently targeting. Switching to a platform in this window changes some internal scripting defines. It triggers a script recompilation, and it starts an asset reimport so that the assets in our project are ready for the platform we want to build to. Because yes, this is the window where we trigger our builds, assuming, of course, that you're not already using custom scripting to work around some of the well-documented shortcomings that this window has. So what are some of those shortcomings? Well, the settings found in the window are stored locally across multiple files, some of which even are stored in the library folder, a folder that's very commonly on the ignore list for version control systems. And that means that each developer is configuring these settings manually for every build. And it's very easy to lose access to them when you're switching platforms or you're pulling from version control, changing environments. And it's fair to say that that isn't ideal, especially when you're targeting multiple platforms within the same project. There's one set of settings per platform. And when you're targeting platforms like Android, that could be a phone, it could be a games console, it could be a car, a VR device, some of which you may even be targeting from within the same project, and you may want different settings for those things. So that's not ideal. There's a limited amount of configuration options for the platform. This is really just our platform build settings and our scene list side by side. And the project settings, as you all know, are global across all of these. So looking at this window alone, there's a very limited visibility on what the project right now is even targeting. This is just a list of what this editor install, not this project, could potentially target. There's limited information on the platforms you're currently targeting. And for those that are unavailable, there's no information here on how to onboard onto those platforms. We know that our customers need to target multiple platforms to be successful. And this window isn't helping with this. So for these reasons, it's rare you find platform build settings as any sort of source of truth for building. And it's no wonder that developers are relying on third-party assets or custom scripting to work around these limitations. So with those issues in mind, I am pleased to present the build profile window. This window in Unity 6 replaces the old build settings window. So the window has grown a little, and that's in order to support two workflows in one window. We're going to be referring to the two workflows as the build profile workflow, that's the new one, and the classic platform workflow, that's the one from 2022 versions and previously. So why two workflows? Well, we wanted to add new features and improvements to try and solve some of the issues that we just mentioned, while also supporting our existing customers in upgrading to Unity 6 with their projects and build scripts as they are. And within the build profile workflow itself, our objectives are to reduce the need for customers to write their own editor tooling to handle common build scenarios, remove some of the maintenance burden relating to platforms for folks that choose to do that still, and we hope to provide more granular configuration of build targets, reduce the need to constantly go back and edit these settings again and again every time you want to build a different type of package. We also have some stuff in here about improving our onboarding story for new platforms and platform discovery. So what is a build profile? A build profile is essentially a container for settings. For the most part, these relate to the build, but they can also influence the way that play mode works. A build profile is an asset. It lives in your project, and it's something you, the developers, can create. A build profile shows the editor you have the intention to build for that platform. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, with previous versions of the editor, as we mentioned, the platforms that your project targets can be a little ambiguous from the editor's perspective. The platform that's currently active, the editor that you're using, the platform modules you have installed, all of these provide a hint to what your project may be targeting. But given that only one platform can be active at a time, the full picture is unclear. So now, with the build profiles, when you create a build profile, that's you telling us for the first time that this project intends to target that platform, because these things are assets that live in a project. And since our build profiles are associated with a platform strongly, we have a moment where we can know for the first time that your project is targeting that platform, and we can think about how we can improve the onboarding journey for this project onto that platform. So we're going to start by having a look at the window. We're going to have a look at what things have changed, and we're going to start with the classic platform workflow. So here it is again. This is the new build profile window. The area highlighted in green, this is the classic platform list. This is the platform list in the old window, and the new one behaves in much the same way. So you still have all the same functionality here to select and to switch platform, configure platform build settings, and trigger a build. In Unity 6, like in previous versions, a project has a single global scene list, and all the classic platforms share this list. In the new window, you can view that when you have any of the classic platforms selected, but in order to edit it, we have moved it to its own entry at the top of the platforms list. That's up here. So this is where we will go now to edit our shared scene list. But aside from that small change, it's just moving the shared scene list into its own entry, we have been careful to leave the classic workflow alone. So that does mean that all of the new features that we're going to see in this presentation today live within the build profile workflow, but that is so that we can leave the classic workflow untouched, so that it is compatible with your existing projects and build scripts. Right, down here, below the classic platform list, this is where our list of build profiles will go, should we choose to opt into this workflow. There's a little onboarding message here and a button. So let's all imagine that we are a developer who wants to create a build profile, and we're going to click the Add Build Profile button. On pressing the button, we're brought to the platform browser. So unlike the build profile window, which replaces an old window, this is a completely new window in Unity 6. The platform browser is a window where we can find all of the platforms that the editor supports, if they're installed or otherwise. We can learn a little bit about each of them, and if that platform is of interest to us, we can add a build profile. So we're going to do that now. We will click Add Build Profile and add ourselves a Windows build profile. And there it is. We have a build profile in the build profile list. I'm going to say build profile a lot in this, more than 100 times, I think. So without looking too closely, this build profile acts a lot like the classic platforms. If we select it, we can see that we have the options here to switch profile and configure platform build settings. We can make it the active profile. And we can even press build and run, just like you might expect. But the difference here is that this profile is an asset. It goes into your project, it can be renamed to suit its purpose, and it can be shared in your version control system of choice. It can be shared with your team. So a quick note on these assets and their locations. Like all assets in your project, you can keep them wherever you like, but by default, when they're created by the build profile window, they go into a folder in the settings section of the project there under a subfolder called build profiles. And while we're talking about creating build profiles, as well as adding them from the platform browser, you can, of course, copy them from another project. They're just assets. You can duplicate them, copy and paste them from within the project window, like other assets. You can take a configured classic profile and copy it to a new profile, and you can duplicate them from within the build profile list. Anyway, back to the new build profile window. So everything on the right here is now associated with this build profile asset. So all these settings are stored within the asset, and that means that we can start to customize this build profile more than we can a classic platform. So the first benefit of opting into this new workflow is that our build data section can be customized. We can choose to have a completely custom scene list if we want one for each of our profiles should we wish. So this lets us vary the content we're including in our build when we're using a build profile, either limiting build times when testing specific issues for subsets of your game content, or creating demos or vertical slices. Another benefit that's exclusive to build profiles is these additive scripting defines. You can set these defines to change the way that your build works when you're building for a specific profile, or when that profile is active in editor play mode. These scripting defines are additive over the ones you find in player settings. So there's no need to replicate a full set of your project's scripting defines here. You only add the ones that you care about to customize this build profile's behavior for its specific purpose. And of course, you can set platform build settings for a build profile. Do you want this to be a development profile, a release one, a package build? Do you want it to export a Visual Studio solution? Anything you like. So you can set up a group of profiles that contain different settings for different purposes. And since they're assets in your project, you can share them with your team, and they can use them by name without them having to configure these settings themselves. It's also possible in Unity 6 to add an override for the project's player settings to a specific profile. This will let you configure a complete set of player settings that are used when this profile is built. And if you press that Customize button there, can we see this down here is a little low? At the point at which you press the button, a complete set of player settings is taken into an override set, and it's possible to update or override that override set at any time from the little drop-down menu. So if we do that now, we can see that this build profile now contains a complete set of player settings. So player settings is a very diverse set of settings. It gives you fine-grained control over a lot of different things, but perhaps most importantly, it lets you configure your icon, splash, publishing, package signing settings, and having different publishing settings for different build profiles helps when you are, for example, targeting different Android storefronts. And now we have build settings inside an asset, inside our project. We can make the logical leap and create a whole bunch. So here I have 6 build profiles, 3 targeting web and 3 targeting Windows for all my various development needs. I have named them sensibly so that I know which one to choose when I'm doing what kinds of work. And in my example here, I have just 3 for each, but you can have as many as you like for any of the platforms you have access to. Along with the new workflow, build profiles also comes with a new API that makes it possible to use them in your build scripts. So if there are things that you want to do before or after your build, you can still use build profiles as the container for your settings. It also means you can use the same profile and so the same settings when building manually from within the editor as when you're building on your build machine. The API supports creating, switching, configuring your build profiles from your scripts. And because switching platform from within a script in batch mode can cause issues, as I'm sure you know, we've also added a command line argument to let you activate a build profile when launching the editor in batch mode. In the example here, you can see I have the activate build profile argument with the path there to my build profile asset. Let's take a quick look at the API here. We've got some code. This is the code for switching build profile, making it the active profile. All we need here is access to the asset. I'm using the asset database here, but you can also use the Unity Editor selection API, however you prefer. we're using build profile.setActive build profile, and that will just make this the active build profile in the editor. Here's an example of how a developer might launch a build using a known build profile. We've added an overload for the build pipeline build player method that takes a build player with profile object, into which we can put our build profile, the output path, and any settings that we want. And our third example, this shows you how to check if a build profile is active. So you can call build profile.getActive build profile, and if that returns null, then you have a classic platform as your active platform. But if not, then it will return you the build profile. Regardless if a build profile is active or not, editor user build settings active build target will always report the platform that is currently active. So you can use that to get the active platform type when you're using build profiles. Okay, thank you. That was a lot of information all at once, and a lot of editor UI for an afternoon. We've been mentioning in passing lots of different use cases, but I think let's take a little bit of time now to think about who on your team might be creating and using build profiles. Here we have a developer, and they're already using Unity 6. That's fantastic. But they have yet to try out build profiles, so let's encourage them to do that now. Okay, the developer has discovered build profiles, and they've even created a few. They're having a great time. At this point, these profiles are just for them, but they represent a couple of specific tasks that they need to do on a regular basis. There's one here for deep profiling and one for exporting a Visual Studio solution. The developer discovers that they like being able to set these settings without any risk of error whenever they want, without even having to think about it. Perhaps at this point, they're not using any more of the advanced features of build profiles, but they're already seeing some benefits. We fast forward and we find our developer is going deeper into the world of build profiles. They choose to create a few more, and they check them into their version control system of choice. These new profiles are covering common build tasks with content and settings that are known. These are release builds, builds for testing and debugging, that sort of thing. They still keep a few files locally as a sort of scratch pad, but whenever these become useful for others, they can check them into version control and share them. And once the profiles are in version control, a known good set of profiles with for common build tasks, these can then be shared with other developers on the team, and now everyone is on the same page when it comes to builds. And once build profiles are available to all team members, then QA, tech artists, anyone who is comfortable using the editor, they too can produce builds of different kinds with known good settings. And as the team starts to target multiple platforms, their build profile set begins to grow too. And once build profiles are the source of truth for what goes into a build, including content, settings, and everything, then we can introduce the build machine. This machine is consuming build profiles and making regular builds using the editor in batch mode. So there are some significant benefits and new features should you opt into the new workflow. Let's take a look at a few more concrete use cases and examples of what different teams might be doing with build profiles. In this example, a team has configured a set of profiles that lets them switch platform build settings to a different set that supports known use cases. They have one for making release builds, one for development, and a few for different types of profiling. The whole team has access to these, and they can switch between them as easily as switching platform. Since they're all targeting the same base platform, there's no need to re-import anything, so switching platform happens without much delay. So no more checking and unchecking boxes every time they want to create a different type of package. In this example, the developer is also using their release profile on their build machine, using new command line option to activate the profile before building. In our second example here, the developer has created a set of build profiles that let them leverage the build data section on the build profile to build a subset of their game content. In this case, it's for a demo, but we touched earlier on using this for a vertical slice or even making builds faster when you're using a subset of your game's content. The developer in this example is also using the additive scripting defines for enabling special demo features that change or limit functionality in the game when it's running with a subset of the game's content. And in our third example, a developer is using the player settings overrides to configure different icons, key stores, and so on, to enable them to build different versions of their Android game for different storefronts. Okay, this is where things get spicy. We're going to jump into the Unity editor. I'm going to press the right button for that to work. And we're going to create a couple of build profiles live. So this isn't the most advanced use case, but I'd like to show you where these things live, what buttons you press. So here in my scene, I've got some cubes and some spheres, which is very advanced. And up here, where you might be expecting to find the build window, we have the build profile window in Unity 6. So I'm going to add a build profile for the editor I'm currently using. And I'm going to add a new scripting define. I'll just show you here. On my cube, I have a cube script, and on my sphere, a sphere script. And all they're doing is enabling or disabling these objects based on the scripting defines. So for the new profile here, I'm going to add the cube mode scripting define, and I'm going to rename this to cube profile. And now I'm going to switch to this profile. So since we have additional scripting defines here, it is going to cause the project to recompile. And now when I enter play mode, we should have a cube. Very powerful. And let's do that one more time. So we're going to take our cube profile and we're going to duplicate it. You can see here in my build profile folder, these assets are popping up, and we can even see them in the inspector. So let's go back to the build profile window, and this new profile I'm going to rename to sphere profile. And I'm going to swap my cube mode for my sphere mode. And we'll switch to this profile. Wait for everything to recompile. And now we have a sphere instead of a cube. Some powerful stuff. Thank you so much. So it's not the most advanced use case, but hopefully you can see within a couple of minutes, I'd create profiles to configure my project in different ways. If we wanted to as well, we could jump down here and customize our player settings and then rename our product so that we know that this is our demo that contains a sphere, and this one is a demo that contains a cube. If I can spell cube. Okay. That's enough of that. Okay, I'd like to stop here for a moment and talk a little bit about some details that may come up when you're using build profiles for the first time that may not be immediately obvious. First of all, it's worth remembering that build profiles and the classic platforms are not the same. While you can use them at the same time, the workflows are different, the APIs they interact with are different, and they support different feature sets. When a profile is active, it may even change behavior of some existing APIs that previously worked with the classic platforms. For the most part, it's so these APIs remain useful when you're no longer using the classic workflow, but this is a change, so it's good to be aware of it. And again, I will say that if you don't plan on using build profiles, if you do not have a build profile active, there will be no change to behavior. So you don't need to worry about this for existing projects and build scripts. So here are some examples of APIs that differ. Player settings, you may be able to guess this one. If you have a build profile active and that profile has player settings overrides enabled, the API that lets you read and modify these settings will now actually be reading and modifying the overrides. Editor user build settings. This API can still be used to switch the active build target to a classic platform, but as we saw earlier in the section on the new API, that's not how we switch build profile. But as we also mentioned then, the active build target will report the correct target when you're using either a build profile or a classic platform. And editor user build settings, the scenes in there, which you'll know as the method for accessing the global scene list in previous versions, it will still do that for classic platforms. But for build profiles, once it's active, it will return info about the build profiles custom scene list should it have one. Another thing to consider is the potential changes to switching platforms when using build profiles. So when switching profiles to one of a different base platform, this is exactly the same as switching classic platforms in the old workflow, and assets may need to be re-imported. When switching between profiles of the same type, this won't happen, but there can be other impacts of switching profile. So this is a side effect of introducing more settings into the build profiles, but now switching profile can change a whole host of settings, and some of those, when changed, can have side effects of their own, and we needed to respect that behavior, or it could result in an inconsistent editor state. So some of these things to watch out for are as follows. If you have custom scripting defines on a profile, switching to or from the profile can cause a recompile. In the example here, switching from the classic workflow platform to the Windows debug profile will cause a recompile and domain reload. And since we have custom scripting defined on the Windows debug to enable debug things. But switching profile to the build profile name just Windows, this won't cause a recompile as there's no custom scripting defines on this profile. Switching from one of these build profiles to the other will cause a recompile for the same reason, as they don't share the same scripting defines. Another thing that you might see when switching profiles that change player settings is the potential to change a setting that requires an editor restart. Now, this behavior isn't new, but the ability to change these settings as a side effect of changing platform or profile is new. Now, there aren't many of these, and they're unlikely to be settings you're going to want to change a lot, but it is good to be aware that this is a possibility. So here are two examples of settings that request an editor restart. We have the incremental garbage collector, and enabling or disabling graphics jobs is another. So we touched on this earlier, but it's worth mentioning it again. Just like in previous versions, switching platform isn't supported in batch mode. Similarly, set active build profile isn't available in batch mode either, and for the same reason. Since changing platform requires a script recompile, which can't be done while scripts are running, and the editor will stop after executing the designated script in batch mode. This is why we added the new command line option. So we've mentioned this a couple of times already, but build profiles are assets, which is great. You can share them with your team via version control, and you can modify them locally for your own needs, but be aware, if you've got important profiles, not to modify them and check them into version control accidentally. You can always keep local profiles for yourself if you need to, and not every profile needs to be shared. So, hopefully you'll agree that these changes are a significant improvement over what was previously possible without resorting to custom scripting in the editor. But we know that we're just scratching the surface here of what our customers are already doing with custom scripts. So let's take a look at what else we're working on for future releases of Unity 6. Okay, so now that we have a workflow for showing intent to build for a given platform, for new and in development projects, we want to leverage that to make sure that the onboarding experience for new platforms is as good as it can be. We want to ensure that profiles, when added to a project, come with sensible defaults for platform build settings. We want newly added profiles to come pre-configured with settings and overrides that are optimized for the platform you've chosen. And we want to add packages that are required for the correct functioning of that platform. And we also want to offer packages and services that we think that you'll need. So for example, if you're choosing an XR platform from the platform browser, we might offer the XR interaction packages. If you're choosing a mobile platform, you might want our monetization packages. So this is something that we are currently working on adding. We also want the option to add more than one pre-configured profile. So for example, on web, where development and release have strict and differing settings requirements, perhaps we add two profiles when you choose that platform from the platform browser. One with settings for development and one with settings for release. And if you're using the platform browser to browse for a closed platform, one you don't have access to currently, for whatever reason, we want to provide you with information for what steps might be required to onboard to that platform. So I just mentioned how we're working on improving the onboarding experience for new platforms. And one new platform that's really informed the way that we think about this onboarding experience is Quest. So if you saw the roadmap earlier this week, you'll see that we have an upcoming version where we'll be adding a new platform specifically for Quest. And this will be the first platform to benefit from these improvements relating to platform onboarding. In earlier versions of the Unity editor, you'd need to use the Android platform in order to target Quest, and the developer would need to switch to this platform and configure the project for Quest by installing packages, configuring specific settings, and getting appropriate prefabs into the scene. We measured this as requiring something in the region of 36 steps in order to go from 0 to be able to deploy a working build onto a device. And that's when you know what those steps are. You already know what packages you need to install and what settings you must configure. When you choose this new platform from the platform browser, and we're able to deliver sensible defaults for platform build settings, pre-configured profiles with settings overrides, and recommended and required packages, that number of steps goes from 36 down to just 7. And we're looking to improve that further. I hope that you'll find that when this platform does become available, using a build profile to target MetaQuest will be the simplest way to add Quest to an existing or a new project. In addition to the platform browser and onboarding improvements, the team is hard at work adding new settings override options. We're looking into adding the ability to override global graphic settings per profile. We're also adding the ability to configure what quality levels get included with each build. And including different quality levels is great, because when targeting platforms with different capabilities, such as mobile and high-end PC, you can also, inside the quality level, configure your render pipeline asset, which further increases the ability for you to configure graphical options for each of your builds. So that's, I hope, everything you need to know about build profiles in Unity 6. So a quick overview of what we've looked at. We have taken a look at the main features of the new window, the classic workflow that you already know, the new build profile workflow, which is new, and we've had a look at the new customization options it provides, and we had a quick look at the platform browser. So while that was probably a lot of Editor UI for a breakout session, I hope you'll agree that this is a worthwhile improvement in Unity 6. And I thank you for your attention. The 3 things that I hope you'll take away from the session are that the classic workflow, if that's how you like to build, or if you have existing infrastructure or tooling that uses it, please know that it's here to stay and you can continue using it. The build profile workflow is new in Unity 6. It's more flexible, it has better customization options, and a new API and command line interface. So check that out, and please let us know how you get on. The platform browser is a new place to find platform opportunities and to get set up on new platforms more quickly. And there's plenty of new stuff coming in future versions of Unity 6. So I'm a product guy. I'm always eager to hear about feedback that you have on the product as a whole. But given that this is a new feature in a new version of Unity, build profiles is something that I'm particularly excited for you to try. I hope that you will bring your feedback to me. And of course, I'll be here at Unite until the very end. So you can come and find me if you've already had a chance to use build profiles, or you can join us on the forums or on our Discord, or you can reach out to me directly. So thank you again for your attention.